Welcome to another edition of Building Thinking Classroom. I'm an 8th grade Texas teacher. This is my second year doing Building Thinking Classroom. It's my 25th year in the classroom. And preface, I've had these kids before. I had them in 6th grade. I'm currently in 8th grade. So I know what they're capable of. And so we came to the boards. Yes, this is the second week of school. We came to the boards with a full-blown short constructor response. They're not great. We talked about how to make them better, but I want to show you what I did. So we are currently reading the Red Pyramid. This is my honors class. And then I put the question on the board. And here they have the question on the board. And so this was a tough question. And so it talks about, it says Carter describes his relationship with the father and sister. So how does Riordan use Carter's observations and thoughts to develop his characters? Use specific evidence from the chapter to support your answer. I wanted to see what they remembered from 6th grade. So this is, we have come and we've done activities at the board. We've been to the board. But my thought process today was, I want to see how good you really are, because I had them in 6th grade. They had a great teacher in 7th grade. And so I'm starting from the top. I'm not starting from the bottom with this class. And so I wanted to see where we were at. And I got to see where we were at, and we talked about these, and that's the thing. So we analyzed all 6 of our responses that we had. And I'm going to show you what I pointed out when we did that question and things that they could do to improve it. Is it going to be perfect? No. Next time we do it, this is a work in progress. But if I can get them seeing these things, then they're going to be able to respond better the next time that we do this. So let's take a look to see what they actually wrote and how I suggested a couple of things. I'm not going to do it all at once, but a couple of things they could do to make it better, right? Okay, so here we go. All right, so first thing first, when they were talking about this is talking about Carter's character. So they came to the board and they wrote Carter's characters that they noticed in chapter 1, because this is only chapter 1. We haven't got that far into the book. So they wrote down some things they noticed about Carter. So that was the first step of what this group did. And then they came up with their answer. And so they talked about developing his characters. They picked he was observant. And then they gave evidence to state it, that he was observant. And so clutching his work bag. So they proved their point. And then they came down right here, and the evidence shows Carter's observant. All right. So yes, technically that probably would get you points. But this is my honors class, so I'm going to be hard on them. And this was, a decent response if you were not in my honors class. And so a couple of things that we talked about with observant. So I'm not going to hit them with all the things that were wrong with this at the beginning, but I did point out. So in the last sentence, they repeated exactly what they said at the very top, where it's observant. And then they said it again, observant. So this is what I wanted them to work on. Of course, then we did talk about smartness, and we're like, what other word could we use? And they were running out of time, and they wanted to put intelligence, but then they ended up choosing that because it was easier before the timer went off. But we did talk about that for sure. But I wanted them to come up with a different way to say this evidence shows Carter's observant, because they've already said that at the top. And so that we took out this evidence shows, because we need a strong response, and we just need to go into Carter is very aware. And so that's where they started coming up with different ways, like other groups, not just this group, but we talked as a whole how we can improve this. And I didn't want to like bombard them with everything. And so if they would have done that, that would be a true statement when they change that. Yes, they would have gotten points with this, but we're trying to elevate their writing. So that was just one thing that I pointed out that we could change, and we cannot repeat ourselves. And so that was one step that we did. So I hope that's helpful in how I am teaching writing and getting them to develop their ideas. Like I said, I'm a Texas teacher. I do SCRs and ECRs, and I need them to develop their writing. Yes, there was a lot of things that we're going to fix on that, but this was their first attempt this year, just from what I knew that they could do back in 6th grade versus in 7th grade. And so they didn't do a bad job. They would have received points for that, but we're trying to elevate. So I'm hoping that helps you. So think of a question, you can put it into ChatGPT, Magic School AI. It will come up with the TEKS leveled, and that's what I do a lot of times unless I have some material. And I pick one question, we go to the board, and we talk about it. And so we've talked about character. Yesterday we talked about character motivations, and we used some evidence when we were talking about character. So this was something that they should have been familiar with, just because it was already discussed. So pick a skill that you're working on. I happen to work on character. I'm working on character motivations and character and coming up with the evidence. So then you can tailor your questions to that in building Thinking Classroom. So I hope that helps for another task that you can do with your novel or your story or your passage that you're working on. Happy teaching.